a bonus edition of Daily Delivery and a bonus edition that kept growing throughout Friday. I am your host, Michael Rand. Did not anticipate an extra episode on this fine Friday afternoon, the second to last day of January. But here we are. You guys have probably all heard at least most of the news at this point. Early Friday, probably at 9:30, 10 o'clock, right after the original edition of this podcast went up, we learned that the Twins and Derek Falvey are parting ways. That's how they termed it. I think through the course of the day, we came to realize that that was more of a Tom Pohlad decision than a Derek Falvey decision, but that was how the team is framing it. As we were talking to Derek Falvey a couple hours later, the former Twins president of baseball operations, we came to find out Kwesi Adofo-Mensah fired by the Vikings, general manager of the Vikings. So two massive personnel moves that we need to get to in this special episode. I'll have Bobby Nightingale, Twins beat writer at the Star Tribune, on in just a few minutes to break down the Twins news. For a deeper dive into the Vikings and Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, I would encourage you to listen to the latest Access Vikings podcast. That crew is going to go into depth on everything that entails. But at the top of the show here, before we get to Bobby, I wanted to kind of tie the whole day together because, man, what a bonkers day it has been. Strikes me that as we think about both of these things in tandem, as we think about the news in general, the first thing that strikes me is it ends up being more, both these things end up being more surprising in the timing more than the reasoning in both cases. Because I think if you take a step back, neither of these things are terribly surprising, even if they caught us off guard on this day, right? You look at it and you say, the timing wise, it's like, wow, like, Derek Falvey just took over both the business side and the baseball side less than a year ago. That promotion to, president of baseball operations happened last March. Kwesi Adofo-Mensah got an extension like 9 months ago as Vikings general manager, both of them out. Kwesi getting ready for the draft right now. You don't usually see NFL GMs let go on the same timeline as coaches unless there's like a dual move being made and they're cleaning house, because a lot of these guys have contracts that run through the draft. Baseball, likewise, Twins are 2 weeks away from going to spring training. Like, the timing in both cases, both in terms of their recent ascent, either the promotions or extensions, and then, of course, what's coming up on the horizon for both, that's a surprise. The reasoning, though, not terribly surprising, right? When you dive into it, you think, okay, Twins haven't made the playoffs 4 of the last 5 years. They've struggled, even though it seemed like they were a team that thought they could compete, thought they were better than they were. And then top it off, you've got a new controlling owner in the Twins. Tom Pohlad comes in with a new vision, a fresh set of eyes, looks at everything and says, you know what? Guy in charge of all this was Derek Falvey. This is the direction we want to go going forward. Maybe the vision doesn't align. Maybe there's got to be some accountability for how all this happened. Derek Falvey is now out. Same with the Vikings. Look at Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. Vikings made the playoffs 2 of the last 4 years, didn't win a playoff game. More than that, having to dive deep into free agency, especially in 2024 and 2025, to paper over for what could generously be described as mediocre drafts. And I think most of us would be even less generous in describing them as bad, some of them disastrous. You go back to his first draft in 2022, where they had lots of high picks, didn't yield much of anything at all, traded back, traded up, didn't really get the things they wanted in that draft, ended up kind of striking out there. 2023, you get Jordan Addison, but jury's a little bit out on that as he's continued to face some off-field issues. 2024, J.J. McCarthy draft, Dallas Turner draft, a ton of investment in that. 2025, you got Donovan Jackson, but you didn't have much draft capital. Both of those years having to dig deep into free agency to offset failures in the draft. So if you look at that, you look at the body of work for Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, you say, okay, not terribly surprising to think that they would be interested in making a change. Now, where this feels different is, yes, in both cases, this is an ownership decision, right? The Wilfs came out with a statement and later a Zoom news conference talking about the why of this. But this is the regime that hired Kwesi Adofo-Mensah. This is these are the owners that have been here. This is a football decision. This is a group of owners reading the room, evaluating things, looking at the guy they hired 4 years ago and saying, this guy wasn't getting it done. We need to make a change. The Twins, it feels different. Like Derek Falvey predates Tom Pohlad by 8 years. He was hired late in 2016, almost 9 years predates Tom Pohlad, because Tom Pohlad's been here 6 weeks. He's been around the team maybe a little bit, but really taking over recently. So this feels like a fresh set of eyes, not a new owner, but a fresh set of eyes within the Pohlad family coming in and evaluating someone who was doing a job that other people said, hey, we think you're doing a pretty good job. You probably can stay in this structure. He comes in and says no. So they feel different in the case of, okay, this is how the Wilf family has decided to reevaluate Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, while the Twins are looking at Derek Falvey with Tom Pohlad now in charge and saying, hey, I've got a different vision for how I want this to be run. I think there needs to be accountability. We want to be competitive. This is how we are going to proceed in the future, and we are going to go in a different direction. So that's what feels different to me. That's what feels similar to me about these. What's undoubtedly true, though, is that what a massive shakeup on a Friday, right? Like, at least it wasn't like a 4 p.m. news dump. Both of these things happened pretty early in the day. Have a chance to kind of catch up and react to them. It was wild, though. Like, while we're talking to Derek Falvey, we find out about the Kwesi Adofo-Mensah news. Lavelle, our colleague, Lavelle Neal III, as I'll talk about with Bobby here in a minute, like, asked the question of Derek Falvey, kind of broke the news to him. He was kind of caught off guard talking about that. So interesting dynamic there. Arguably the two most high-profile teams in this market, at least when they're winning, both making massive changes at the top on the same day. I can't remember a news day quite like this. So trying to tie that all together here at the top. Like I said, more with Bobby Nightingale right now, and I will encourage you to go check out the latest Access Vikings podcast, because they will have you covered with a more thorough Vikings breakdown. As promised, let's bring in Bobby Nightingale Jr. from the Star Tribune to talk through at least the Twins part of the news today, Bobby. I've already kind of just gone into the wildness of the day with both Kwesi Adofo-Mensah and Derek Falvey both out of their respective, high-ranking, top of the food chain personnel decision jobs here in the Twin Cities. A surreal moment when we're in the middle of talking to Derek Falvey. We find out that it's happened to Kwesi. Lavelle, our colleague, asks Falvey, like, hey, what do you think about this? Like, Kwesi, and I don't know. I've never, that's never happened to me before. I don't know about you, but what are you thinking right now as you kind of try to make sense of at least the Twins part of today?
Yeah, that was the first one GM leaving, finding out about another GM leaving in the same town and same role, especially if they're friends too, which you could tell it hit Falvey a little hard to hear the news. But yeah, stunning. I mean, it's just amazing how much this organization has changed in the last 2 years. I mean, you talk about where they were when they won the 2023 playoff series against the Toronto Blue Jays, riding high. They lose to the Houston Astros, and they felt like, okay, this is the beginning of a chapter here, and it turns into this turbulent chapter where payroll gets cut, Thad Levine's gone, more payroll cuts, the trade deadline, everything that happened at last July. Rocco Baldelli's out, and now Derek Falvey's out. You have a new Pohlad and running ownership. So I mean, it's just a ton of changes the last 2 years, and this is kind of the latest step. I mean, I feel like that they've made a lot of changes, and I feel like they're kind of changing the way they operate now with Tom Pohlad in charge. And I feel like this is kind of another step towards Tom Pohlad putting his own imprint on the organization.
The news release that came out Friday morning tried to frame this as a mutual decision, essentially a mutual parting of ways. And there's, elements of truth to that, I'm sure, because as they talked through this, Tom Pohlad and Derek Falvey, you probably saw Tom Pohlad's vision for the Twins was maybe different than Derek Falvey, or at least the role that Falvey's in or how he occupies that space is maybe different than Tom Pohlad sees the kind of direction of the franchise. That said, Tom Pohlad is the owner, or the top of the food chain in the ownership now. Derek Falvey is below him. If there's ever going to be a mutual parting of ways, it is tilted naturally towards the power dynamic of who has more power. After hearing both of them talk on that Zoom call Friday, it does feel to me like this was more of a Tom Pohlad decision than a Derek Falvey decision, and maybe by an overwhelming amount.
Yeah, I mean, I just keep going back to the fact that Derek Falvey he stuck with the organization through when payroll had to get slashed, which was a difficult decision when you're in the front office and you really can't say anything that ownership wants me to cut payroll, and this is what is mandated. That's a tough spot to be in. The trade deadline last year was a tough spot to be in when you're trading Carlos Correa just to get rid of his salary and not really for baseball reasons. You could argue some of the other trades were baseball related, but tearing down a roster that in that dramatic of a fashion, I think it's frustrating for the person who has to do that. Firing Rocco Baldelli, I mean, Derek Falvey's never made it a secret how much he appreciates Rocco and how close those two were, and that was a tough move as well. So I think it's one of those. He stuck around through all of those. I think it's just he did mention it, and Tom Pohlad is new to the organization. I know he's another Pohlad, but Derek Falvey had previously worked with Jim Pohlad, then he worked with Joe Pohlad, was pretty close with both of them. I mean, I was pretty confident as long as Joe Pohlad was in charge that Derek Falvey's job was pretty safe if he wanted it to be. And I think that reflected itself when Dave St. Peter stepped down as the business side operations, and they gave Derek Falvey the dual role of business side and baseball operations, which there's only one other executive, Mark Shapiro in Toronto, who has that type of power. So I think it speaks to that, and I think Tom Pohlad said, I want two people in those jobs, one business side, one baseball, and I don't know if that's the real reason that Derek Falvey's no longer running the team. I mean, it was going to be a step back in probably responsibilities partially, but I think Tom Pohlad has a certain vision of the way he wants to run the team, and he wasn't around the team the last few years, and I think that's kind of where it all comes to a head. Is he has all these new ideas, and this is just a step towards him doing what he wants to do. And you can frame it as mutually parting ways, because Derek Falvey, I'm sure, had some input on the decision, and it sounds like he's at peace with it. But they both spoke, so I mean, it speaks to they're not angry enough that neither of them would speak. But
right,
it's just a kind of a massive day for changes.
Yeah, it really was. And you have to think back now, like it was less than a year ago that the transition fully took place, where Falvey took over the business operations role. I think it was like March 1st, something like that. I do wonder, like retrospectively, like that put with more power comes great responsibility. Spider-Man and all those folks. If he had to do it over again, I wonder if like that probably spread him thin to a degree. It added a layer of stress to him, because this was not an easy time, either on the field or financially. I do think that Tom Pohlad is right that those roles should be separated, but I also kind of wonder if Derek Falvey is being kind of honest and maybe takes a step back a month from now, he might realize maybe that wasn't the perfect setup for him either, because it put a lot on his plate.
Yeah, and I think it was a tough situation in terms of, I mean, the team was for sale. I think he was trying to prepare the organization to say, if a new owner comes in, I want the business side of the organization to be as strong as the baseball side. They've had layoffs inside the organization, pro scouting department and some other departments. And I think they were trying to kind of make it where it was configured enough, structured the way it was to say, okay, if a new owner comes in, they're going to feel good about the structure, and they're not going to just take a hammer to the organization and say, we're going to change all these things. And there's a new front person in charge, Tom Pohlad, but he's keeping Jeremy Zoll as the lead of the baseball operations, who was the GM last year. He's going to hire a new business side, but I think that was kind of what I think Derek Falvey was trying to protect when it felt like there was momentum towards an actual sale last year. If the team gets sold, let me protect the people that are inside the organization as best as I can. And probably let him a little thin. I mean, I'm sure there was a lot of catching up to do on the business side. I mean, there's a reason Dave St. Peter did that for as long as he did, and it wasn't Terry Ryan's job. So I think there's some element to truth there that as he steps away and get more time passes, I'm sure he'll realize, that was quite a year to do both roles.
It leaves the Twins in a weird spot. I mean, I think both Tom Pohlad and Derek Falvey kind of got asked, like, why now? Like, it's 2 weeks until spring training. Like, even if you don't think this is the perfect structure going forward, I mean, Tom Pohlad has been in this role for 6 weeks. Would it have been better off seeing how it went for a season or a year and then making the change? His answer was, hey, there's never a perfect time to do something. If you believe if you believe it's the right thing, then you should just do the thing. That said, it kind of puts the Twins in a little bit of a spot, because you're still talking to free agents, you're still trying to sort out your roster, and now you've kind of lost the person at the top of that, even though Jeremy Zoll certainly has been involved in a lot of that as well.
Well, I do wonder, just kind of no, this was kind of the part that was left unsaid, but Tom Pohlad coming in, I mean that the franchise was not in it was not in good shape. I mean,
No.
I think it's clear he feels that way. And in
Yeah.
terms of business side, racking up as much debt as it was, pushing Joe Pohlad out, which put a huge strain on the family, and was kind of a rift between Tom and Joe, the brothers themselves, and their parents. So I mean, I do think it's kind of a recognition. Hey, they did not make the playoffs the last 2 years, and they felt like they had teams good enough to make the playoffs. And one, they collapsed in 2024. 2025, you could argue, didn't have enough depth, but before the trade deadline, they certainly felt like they had a chance to compete. And all the preseason projections and all those things, if you want to believe in them, had them as a team that should have competed for a division title.
Yeah.
Now, the axe fell on Rocco Baldelli at the end of the season, but I think there was a lot of people who said, "Why isn't the axe on Derek Falvey?" And I'm sure Tom Pohlad was probably. I feel like that's the part that's left unsaid. Is if you're going to make all these changes, you feel like the organization was going in the wrong direction. Derek Falvey was here for that. And if you want to make a big move 6 weeks into your tenure, I mean, obviously it's not great timing when it's 2 weeks before spring training and you have all this stuff happening. But if you felt like the organization was off the tracks the last couple of years, Derek Falvey's job was certainly, I feel like there's a reason to make a change if you felt like he bore responsibility for the last 2 seasons.
Well, I think just even in these 6 weeks, the interactions we've had with Tom Pohlad and more importantly, his actions so far, Tom Pohlad's not messing around. This is a different operation probably than it has been in the past, at least from a top-down Pohlad leadership structure. It's certainly a change from where they were with Joe, I think.
Yeah, so I got a call from Patrick Royce, so I think he's writing this. It'll be one of his weekend columns, but kind of the good old days where it was kind of, everyone who, if they left the Twins, they still stuck around in some capacity. I mean, you look around and, Paul Molitor and Tom Kelly and Ron Gardenhire and all the former managers, some of whom were fired, are still, around the organization. And Terry Ryan was around as long as he was, and kind of that front office group. I feel like this is kind of a more modern day sports franchise, if you will, in terms of, I think there's more pressure in terms of if this team's not going to do good this year, if the team's, if the team's not winning enough, I feel like I don't know if hold more accountable is the right way to say it, but I feel like jobs are more on the line. And that's some franchises operate that way. I mean, you look at Cleveland Browns and New York Jets and a lot of teams that fire their coaches and front offices all the time. And, maybe that's kind of injecting some new life into the Twins. That's the goal. Because, I mean, Tom Pohlad did say, I mean, the goal is to compete in 2026. He expects payroll from where it is right now to opening day to still go up a little bit. Not a lot, but still a little bit. And even kind of dismiss saying, don't focus on payroll, focus on our record at the end of the year. And if we're not competing in September, judge us on that. So, I mean, I feel like that was not saying that putting Jeremy Zoll on warning, but saying, if this is a franchise that's not going to be run kind of like a mom and pop shop that it had been, the past few decades, the time to win is now.
They probably don't, Bobby, want to operate like the Browns and the Jets. Don't say that. Those teams have been in the abyss for a long time. And I don't think that's what you're saying. But I mean, you're right, though. He's kind of putting this in notice. And I think, he probably needs to be careful with what he wishes for, because if they get to the end of the season and they have a bad record, people will focus on the record and the payroll, not the record instead of the payroll. And they will link the two. And I think that's fair. Like the teams that are able to spend more have better players and are therefore able to win. His point is, I think we've spent enough that we can still field a competitive team, and I guess we'll see if that's true or not. Is what he's talking about, though, like changes running things differently, or this being different? I still don't know if we've fully seen what the vision of different is articulated.
Yeah, and I think that's still to come. I mean, I think Tom Pohlad will admit he's not he's not a huge baseball guy. I mean, he wasn't involved with the Twins ownership in the past, was running other Pohlad company businesses. But I remember talking to him at Twins Fest, and he said, I'm leaving the baseball. I have all full trust in Jeremy and Derek to run the baseball side. They don't need me to, talk about signing guys and trades and all those things. I don't think he's involved that way. But obviously the business side is connected to winning. I mean, if you don't win, fans don't want to go to games. And for the Pohlads to rebuild trust with the community, I mean, they're going to have to start winning and winning a lot. As long in payroll kind of going up along with that. And I mean, I think partially it's just I think a realization from an outsider coming in saying, things were maybe too chummy. A shakeup was needed, and I don't think that's wrong. I mean, I don't think. If the Twins weren't going to win, I mean, the AL Central the last 2 years, Twins felt like they had a winning team and didn't win. And there's prices to be paid for that in sports. And you saw it with Rocco Baldelli, you saw it with Thad Levine, and now you see it with Derek Falvey.
Few more things, and we'll kind of keep working on this because it's going to be now. Now the point becomes, who are they going to hire to replace? At least the business side. It sounds like they're not replacing basically the baseball side. That's Jeremy Zoll's job at this point. But what ultimately, like, having a hard time like framing what is Derek Falvey's legacy here, and I think they got to some of that. I think in the news release, like, kind of modernized their baseball operations, brought analytics, brought the kind of a more robust kind of player evaluation. Certainly a lot of people working for the Twins in that capacity right now, assistant GMs up and down the roster. The winning kind of came quick. The 3 of the first 4 years he was here, they made the postseason, but they definitely lost some momentum both on the baseball side and the business side with COVID. And so 21 through 25, you only make the playoffs that one time. Yes, you win a playoff series finally, but ultimately that's kind of a turning point too when you have to slash payroll after that season. So how do we define the Falvey era, and what's kind of the signature? Like, what does he leave behind, both good and bad, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the high point's got to be 2023 when they finally broke that postseason streak that had lasted 2 decades, 18 games, and finally kind of got that off their back. So that's the high point for sure. As you mentioned, kind of modernizing the organization. I mean, there's a lot of people in baseball that talk about, the Twins do it the right way. If you look at all their minor league coordinators, they get hired from other jobs. Every coach on Rocco Baldelli's staff last year has a job in a similar role, which I think is pretty rare for a team that has a losing record and finishes with 70 wins, and they all finish. Every coach on that staff ends up that isn't still with the Twins, gets a similar type job in another place. I mean, I think that speaks to they're at least hiring the right people. But yeah, the wins didn't come, and I think he even mentioned that was kind of his regret after not building. He said not building on 2023 was kind of his regret in terms of just not carrying that momentum over. The Twins, for better or worse, were they kind of lived and died with the homer there for a little bit, and kind of stayed away from the more athletic types where their defense is not great. They did a good job with some pitching. I mean, they trading for Pablo Lopez, I think, will go down as a good deal, even though you had to give up Luis Arai. Joe Ryan for 2 months of Nelson Cruz was a great trade. But he never developed kind of that Cleveland when he was hired for that pitching pipeline that it never kind of developed the ace that's kind of, I don't know. It's been a long time since the Twins have developed a homegrown ace. So I feel like there's some things that when he was hired to do, he got close to doing. Got some playoff success, but I feel like maybe it was just a little short. Modernized the organization, but got the Twins to the brink of where they are, and maybe payroll limits and play a role in that, and why the Twins haven't been able to get over the hump. Even with the Bomba squad and getting past the Yankees, but I feel like he moved the organization into a better place. He moved him into a more modernized and got him to the hump, but just wasn't able to get him over the hump.
Last thing then, maybe, is it fair to think they're going to be competitive? I mean, Tom Pohlad was pretty adamant about that. He was like, I expect to be competitive this season, even with some of those, the payroll. We'll see where it winds up, but as of right now, it's as low as it's been since 2017, right? That's what we've been writing. That's the first year of the Derek Falvey era, and money isn't exactly the same as it was then. There's inflation, there's other markers. So is it fair to say this should be a team that's competitive this season? Is this just like taking a narrow view of how mediocre the AL Central is, or do they really feel that good about themselves, and should they feel that good about themselves?
I mean, the AL Central certainly helps.
Always has, yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, the AL East looks like it's going to be really tough. You don't have to face the Dodgers or be in the same league as the Dodgers helps. But I mean, I think they have the starting pitching that you could at least be interesting for most of the season. I'm still skeptical about the lineup. You have we talked about the shakeups, off the field and coaches and front office, but they really had never had a lineup shakeup. He's still kind of running out the same group where, you're hoping Matt Wallner takes a step forward. You're hoping Royce Lewis becomes what he was before. They need Brooks Lee to be good pretty badly. I mean, if he's has another bad year at shortstop, the Twins are pretty stuck at that position for a little while. But they do have the pitching, I think, starting pitching at least, that'll keep them in every game. I mean, you have to feel good about Pablo Lopez and Joe Ryan each time they step on the mound. Bailey Ober is pretty confident he'll bounce back after last year, which may have been a little injury related. I mean, his hip was bothering him and trying to pitch through it. They have so many young starters that asking for 2 or 3 of them to take a step forward and be reliable and consistent, I don't think is too huge of an ask. I think that's possible, whether it's Zebby Matthews and Taj Bradley or Mick Abel and David Festa. I feel like it's fair to think 2 of those guys will at least take a step forward. And then I don't think the bullpen will be as bad as everyone kind of fears it will be. Yeah, they need a closer. Yeah, they need to be a little bit more reliable. But with how volatile relievers are, I mean, if you would have asked me about Cole Sands going into last year, I would have thought Cole Sands was kind of on that next step, like the Griffin Jacks path, where he could be a great 8th inning guy, and had an up and down year last year, and people have kind of soured on him a little bit, but no reason to think why he can't be one of the better relievers. And Taylor Rogers at least provides some veteran leadership. I think they'll add another 2 or 3 relievers, free agency or trades going forward. So I think that's possible, but I think just the position player core. This is a big test for them. I mean, if they have another bad year, if Royce Lewis has a bad year and Brooks Lee doesn't take a step forward, if Luke Keeschel, who, he looked great last year, but so many of the guys, they just traded Edward Julian and he had a great rookie season and then never recovered. If the league adjusts to Luke Keeschel and he doesn't adjust, where does that leave the Twins? So I think there's a lot of pressure on the position player core to, if they don't perform, I think that's going to be the reason they have a bad season.
Ultimately, it feels like a move that makes it feels less surprising after it happens. Like, I wasn't expecting this to happen. I don't think you were either. After it happens, you're like, wait, what? What happened? And then you're like, okay, like add up the pieces, add up, new person in charge of the ownership group. You think about where they've been. You think about, hey, there were questions about this in, October at the end of the season. Who might take the fall for this? It feels less surprising in retrospect, but it still feels like a surprising day.
Yeah, it does, especially the timing. I mean, they're going to be in Fort Myers in 2 weeks getting ready for the season. And I also think, it's the end of the offseason. I don't think it'll have much of an impact on what the Twins do building their team-wise. Like, they're a pretty collaborative front office. Jeremy Zoll, Derek Falvey, the assistant general managers, they all work in concert together for free agency and trades. So I don't think it'll have a huge effect on that. But I think like Derek Shelton got hired in late October.
Yeah.
The people he met with that hired him were Joe Polad, who's out, Derek Falvey, who's out.
That's a great point. What is he thinking right now? Anyway, that's a story for another day, I'm sure. But yeah.
I mean, he's not a lame duck. I'm sure he has a decent contract, but just one of those, like, everyone who he met with in the final stages that gave the approval for the hire are no longer with the organization or in a diminished role. So, I think that speaks to how much things have changed since November, and kind of where we're at, off the field. I mean, I just think there's a lot riding on the Twins in 2026. They from a fan perspective, I think fan support. This isn't going to bring fans back to the seats or anything like that. But as you mentioned, I think talking it out a little bit more, it starts. You could see, I think, from Tom Polad's perspective, there's a mutual part to this, but I do think you could see how it plays out, where it's like, okay, I wanted things done a little bit differently, and this is where I'm going to focus on.
Yeah, it was top down, and it was the Vikings' decision. Sounds like it was very much top down too, coming from the ownership. They were the ones that put out the statements, and they were the ones that ultimately were in charge of this. What a day, Bobby Nightingale. Thanks for joining me here. Follow all of Bobby's work on StarTribune.com. I'm sure I'll have many, 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 many more things to say about this in the coming weeks and days. But for now, appreciate it. Hope you guys enjoyed the bonus episode. Bobby, be well. Take care. We'll talk to you soon.
Sounds great. Thanks, Mike.